Good afternoon. I'm delighted to be here. I'm really passionate about British manufacturing, having acquired and vertically integrated an injection moulding facility to proudly be making trunkies out of Devon in Cornwall. So I'm going to take you on my roller coaster ride of a journey coming up with the idea for Trunky and turning it into a global brand. But I faced many challenges, not least an infamous appearance on Dragon's Den some 18 years ago. To more recent challenges. And I think actually we learn most from challenges and things that didn't go well. So I'm going to touch on 3 key lessons later on in my presentation where the world sort of turned upside down and how I approached overcoming those challenges using kind of my energy wisely and adapting to change. But as Steph mentioned, some people may have had a bruised ankle, unfortunately, from those trunkies in the airports, but they do tell me you should blame the drivers. And not them themselves. So I'm going to take you back in time to season 3 of Dragon's Den, back in 2006. And I just started my business, and I thought, well, I need some money, I need some funding, I need some business mentoring because I have no idea how to run a business, having not studied that myself. I could do with a bit of exposure too. Well, I got one of those things. So just to refresh your memory, if you haven't seen the episode, this is Dragon's Den. I went on asking for 10% of my company for £100,000. And let's see if this video clip works. Meet Terence and Trixie, the world's first and only ride-on suitcases for globe-trotting tots. Thank you for your time. Now, would anyone like to test ride a Trunky?
I'll do it.
Here we go. Have a go on, Terence.
Are you going to pull me along?
Bearing in mind you're putting small children on this, I mean, I saw you wheel it in a straight line. What happens if it... Oh, OK.
So the pitch was going perfectly. I towed Richard Farley around, who was my target. He had toddlers at the time, so I was really kind of beelining for him as an investor. Everything was going really well until poor Trixie, the pink Trunky here, ended up at Theo Pathetis' feet. And as we now know, kind of he likes to strength test a few products. He noticed that the hook on the strap there bends a bit when you pull it hard. So he decided to see how far he could pull it.
That got my attention. What did you do there? The moment Theo pulled that handle off, the whole integrity of the quality of that product was compromised. So I think you've done really well. Congratulations to get this far, but I just don't think it's a business opportunity.
Okay.
So I'm afraid I'm out.
Rob, let me tell you where I am. You've got problems with the product. You've got
Problems that can be solved.
Yeah, but you shouldn't come here with problems that can be solved without either identifying them or sorting them out first. And it drives me mad that we actually waste our time with these things. I too am out.
Within 7 days, I could do a better job than that, make sure that the clips are working. I could have this in production by the end of next month. Your company is currently worthless. I'm out.
I wouldn't buy it. I wouldn't invest in the company. So I've no interest in this at all, so I'm going to declare myself out.
Would you be prepared to move to something like half the company for 100
No,
grand?
not at all. I can go up to 50%, no.
Okay, well, I'm out. I wish you the best of luck.
So a little bit of a rough ride. The Trunkies had like 3 years of therapy after that, but they did recover. I'm going to come back to how I overcome that particular challenge of car crash national TV just after you started your own business. But let's rewind the clock a little bit before, and I'll tell you how I came up with the idea back in 1998. So I really wanted to become a product designer, and I studied up at the University of Northumbria in Newcastle, and as a second year bright-eyed, bushy-tailed design student, we were asked to enter a national luggage design competition that was sponsored by BASF. So it made sense to design something in plastic. And I went down to my local department store, looking at the luggage section, trying to find inspiration. But back in sort of the late 90s, hard-molded suitcases were quite fashionable. You may remember the likes of Carlton and Samsonite making them. And as a product designer, we're learning all about injection molding and how to craft products using that technology. So I kind of took that away, but it was a black, boring department that kind of I struggled to find some inspiration in. And maybe it's because I'm a big kid at heart, but I kind of found myself in the kids' toy section looking at the ride-on toys. And back then they were all made using rotational molding that wastes a lot of the internal space, and you've got a little seat with that you could lift up with enough storage space for an apple. And I thought, maybe if we use that technology they're using in the adult suitcase, the injection molding, maximize that internal space, you could still make a ride-on toy, but maybe kill two birds with one stone, make a ride-on suitcase. I've traveled a bit. I didn't have kids at the time, but I knew they got a bit bored in the airports. So I kind of fine-tuned my presentation, got a few prototypes knocked up, and went along to the awards judging panel and pitched my idea. And I won the competition. The judges took me aside and said, you know what, Rob, you've got quite a commercial idea here. You should try and license it. Now, I only ever aspired to be a product designer and have some of my products on the shop shelf somewhere. But I thought, that sounds like a good idea. I could retire young, sit on a beach sipping cocktails and wait for these royalty checks to flood in. Yeah, brilliant. So I went and approached Carlton, who were manufacturing down in Croydon at the time with their massive injection molding machines, and really excited, made another sort of prototype, fine-tuned my presentation, was really excited that we were going to revolutionize family travel together. I had this board meeting with them, presented how Trunky was going to revolutionize their business for the child sector, and they kind of didn't say much. So I was like, we're going to transform travel, isn't it brilliant? And they said, Rob, you do realise we make luggage, don't you? And I said, yeah, of course, yeah, that's why I'm here. But you've invented a toy. Maybe you should go and see a toy manufacturer. Ever the optimist, one door closed and new one opened. I thought, maybe there's a toy. So I approached toy manufacturers, see if they'd be interested in revolutionising family travel. You never guess what they'd say. They pointed to another door saying, go and find a luggage manufacturer. So I went through this period of what I call manufacturer ping pong for a couple of years. I was still studying, fine-tuning my product design skills. And then when I graduated, I've kind of worked internationally for a few years. But Trunky was always this idea in the back of my mind, trying and bring this product to market. And in 2003, at the London Toy Fair, I finally found a startup toy company who were really keen to take the idea of a ride-on suitcase on. Within a matter of months, we'd signed a global licensing agreement. I started looking at flights to various beaches where I might be able to retire. And they had their first customer, which turned out to be a company in the Middle East. Now, in the Middle East, Barbie doesn't go too well because of the cultural differences. They'd invented their own doll character called Fula. And it was co-branded the Fula Trunky travel case. They had national TV ads running across the Middle East, and it was all really exciting. Fast forward 3 more years, and we only had one customer in the Middle East. Trunky had never came to the UK, to the US, to Europe. It was just selling in the Middle East. And this toy company that had tried a few other projects that hadn't worked out ended up going into voluntary liquidation. I was working in Bristol at the time. One of my largest clients was Unilever, working as a design consultant and really understanding the power of branding. And to me, Trunky might not have been a piece of luggage or a toy. To me, it seemed like it should be marketed as a lifestyle brand to parents who should be able to get the concept. So I decided to quit my job, start up Trunky, and have a bash at running a business. So on the 5th of May 2006, 1,600 Terence and Trixies arrived in Avonmouth Docks. I was finally able to quit my job and really excited to start this new business. A couple of weeks later, we filmed Dragon's Den. I'll come back to that. But over the summer of 2006, I'd been down the warehouse checking all the stock, making sure we're ready to really kind of take the UK market by storm. All the low-cost budget airlines were doing really well. Loads of people were travelling. And I distinctly remember, I think the German World Cup was on at the time, and I came back one evening, sat down on the sofa, started watching the news to see how England had done, and there was a news flash. And the news reporter came on and said that the secret services had foiled a liquid bomb threat, which was really good. So great. They were trying to blow up planes across the skies, and they stopped them. Brilliant. And then the next words out of his mouth turned me white. And he said, and as a result, the government have decided to ban hand luggage. Turned to my flatmate and said, what did he just say? And yeah, you guys probably all remember it as the time you had to put your liquids in little plastic bags. I remember it as quite a big challenge to overcome where I couldn't actually sell my products for their prime purpose. Couple of learnings from that experience were around trying to pivot the marketing message. So I decided we'd have to start marketing Trunky for staycations. Oh, there's the band, sorry. We designed a Frisian cowprint Trunky to try and market for the UK market and for camping and things. But actually, I quickly learned that I couldn't influence things I had no control over. So despite trying to phone up British Airways, the government department for transport, Heathrow, trying to find out when this hand luggage ban might be lifted, I quickly realised I had no control over this at all. So I should just use my energy wisely, focus on conserving my efforts and my limited resources, and trying to overcome this challenge. Actually, it was only the UK and US that had this problem, so I started exporting internationally, which kind of saved us as well. So a couple of challenges leading up to the appearance on Dragon's Den. Now, obviously, they filmed the TV show. It takes several months before it airs. And the BBC promised me they'd tell me when it was going to air. And season 3 started, and I had no information back when Trunky might appear on the show, or if it might appear. So I kind of given up. I thought I had a lucky escape. But I always went down to the local news agents to pick up the radio times just to double check that there was nothing going to surprise me. And one day I went down, BBC 2, 9 o'clock, BBC Dragon's Den, Wheelie Rubbish was the title. I thought, oh, bugger, I thought I'd got away with this. And on the way back from the news agents, I was thinking, Christ, this could be it. This could be the end of my business. It's literally only been trading for 6 months. No one's probably going to want to buy a Trunky after whatever the BBC are going to edit. But maybe I'm going to get some web traffic, so I probably won't sell anything, but let's put a survey up and just ask people what they think of the product, the concept, try and fine-tune the marketing message, and try and get something from this, what looked like a catastrophic bit of theatrical TV. And had a few friends around that night. We had it on the TV, had a projector playing with the live stats on the website as well, and kind of sitting there thinking, oh my God. And that night we had unbelievable amount of web traffic. I think 3,000 people filled in that online survey with phenomenal words of support. We sold out of our stock. And what happened was my target customer, the consumer, got the product. Investors didn't get it, manufacturers didn't get it, retailers didn't get it, everyone in the supply chain didn't get it apart from the most important person, and that was my customer. And the next day, a lot of people were talking about David versus Goliath and the Trunkies on Dragon's Den around the water fountain at work. So it catapulted us into sort of the national awareness, which was phenomenal. Could never have forecast that happening. I've been trying to get into national retailers, and guess what? The luggage buyer said, see the toy buyer said, see the apparel buyer said, let's go and see someone else, but not me. And no one would take the risk with this new kind of concept. But after Dragon's Den aired, John Lewis picked up the phone at last, and I was able to secure national distribution with those guys. And for the next 3 years, we just could not keep up with demand. So a real turning point there, and just kind of sticking at it, focusing on your energy wisely, and listening to customers were paramount. So we've gone on to create over 50 different Trunkies, but I suppose slightly more importantly, we sold over 5 million of them over the years. I've been trading the business for about 18 years. And as I said before, we kind of started exporting. My first customer actually was after I posted a press release to my favorite design blog at the time. As a design consultant, I had a bit of time to look at these things, design blogs. And to my absolute delight, they posted Trunky up. It turned out it was quite an international design blog. And my first email I opened after I finished work that day was from the Museum of Modern Art, who wanted to buy Trunky for their retail store in New York. I then secured distribution in Australia and Japan just from this one design blog, and it really started taking off. And then more recently, I guess about 10 years ago, we kind of leveraged the power of Amazon to really help us export across Europe and the US with their platform. And unlike Facebook and Google, you can spend a lot on advertising and they don't really care whether you make a return on your investment. Fortunately, Amazon, with their enclosed sort of system, they really kind of support people who are selling well on their platform with the advertising. You kind of create this flywheel effect. And as a result, we were able to get Trunky to #1 in kids' luggage in France, Germany, Spain, Italy, the UK, and I think we got in the top 5 in the US. So taking those learnings, I actually founded an Amazon marketing agency with my brother to try and help other businesses succeed on Amazon and play the Amazon playbook. So that was a bit of a side hustle while running the business. We've received a few awards over the years. So to start with, it was really nice to get a few design awards, and then the consumer awards came along. We started winning trade awards, and then started entering business awards, and was fortunate enough to receive SME of the Year back in 2012 at the National Business Awards. But I guess one of my personal favourite awards was having the honour of receiving an MBE from the Queen and going to Windsor Castle to meet Her Majesty. But always thinking about a PR opportunity, I thought, maybe I should convince one of the trunkies to get dressed up as a corgi, and you never know, we might actually meet a real Queen's corgi at the palace. Now I was sat in a room with all these security guards, and I'm thinking, should I really go up to the Queen holding a furry suitcase, or am I going to get shot? So I decided to leave it in the seat, receive my award, but later that day in the grounds of Windsor Castle, we met the Queen's dog walker, and we got some fantastic PR shots that went viral on social media. So that was a bit of a snapshot of some of the highs, but there were 3 significant lows in the last sort of decade that really affected Trunky. The first of which is around our UK manufacturing story. I got really frustrated with not really being able to control my costs with increase in inflation, the cost of labour in China, the crazy yo-yoing of shipping, which went absolutely bonkers during COVID, and really thought there's an opportunity to look at producing Trunky back in the UK. It did require kind of a complete re-engineering of the product. So the original Trunky was made had 36 metal parts, pins and screws that held it together, and we re-engineered the whole product to have 0 metal, and it just snap-fitted together. So that created a great sustainable product, so it was really easy to recycle, really cost-effective to quickly assemble in the Western Hemisphere. I had the PR vision, let's have Trunkies with Union Jacks rolling off the production line, and maybe the national TV stations would pick up on it. And they did, and we had the 4 national news outlets come down and film Trunkies rolling off the production line. London 2012 was the following year, so we got the LOCOG license and had some fun doing some social media stuff around Chariots of Fire and Trunkies and kids. So everything was looking really good. We kind of started off 2012 really, really excited about championing British manufacturing. My product had a much shorter supply chain. We were able to leverage a lot more of our cash flow to buy that inventory rather than it sitting on the water, etc. The factory just couldn't keep up with the demand. We kept placing the orders and they couldn't quite turn them around in time. And it was just really frustrating for half the year that, they just couldn't make what we were ordering. I was invited to a meeting with the MD who had bought the factory as a management buyout a few years earlier, to a meeting in London, where he told me that they had been really struggling financially and they were just on the brink of going into administration. Would I be interested in buying the factory? Well, as a product designer, I kind of understand manufacturing a bit. I could see the idea of being completely vertically integrated, and with e-commerce really taking off, we could be manufacturing it in Plymouth and literally posting it out to consumers the following day. So it sounded like a brilliant idea. I talked to my business network, to my colleagues, to my friends. They all said, don't do it. But maybe it's the naivety in me, but I thought, no, this feels like the right thing to do. So we bought the factory out of administration, saved 40 jobs down in Plymouth, and then started the 2-year journey to turn what I liken a sinking oil tank around. Kind of lesson number 1 was that there was no leadership, essentially. So the person who bought it as an MBO was seen as a dictator by the employees. The night shift would produce scrap all night without turning the machine off because they just didn't like him. No one had a job description. No one knew what they really should be doing. And they actually hadn't really figured out proper mass production. They were obviously a trade molder making small volume products and not really figuring out this mass production piece. So it took a lot of effort. I think a great example is I hired a consultant to go down there and turn it around. They had a 3-month contract and they stayed for 2 years. It was quite a challenge to turn this around, but the kind of learnings from that were really just getting to know the people down there, finding out what the leadership team back then kind of really were were passionate about what could we hang above the door that would really get people out of bed in the morning. That wasn't really for me to dictate, but just to listen and to find out what they were passionate about. And it was very simple. They were proud to be manufacturing in the UK. So we put it above the door. I kind of delegated as much as I could to them, gave them a lot of rope to decide how to run the factory. They stepped up because they really relished the opportunity to try and lead the manufacturing facility, and having seen how badly it had previously been run, they had learned a lot of lessons too. And we turned the factory around. Here's a little picture of the management team on the day, because I sold Trunky. This is the day after I sold Trunky, and the factory was sold separately. But a fantastic team that turned that business around, and one of my proudest achievements. Challenge 2 is around being copied. Now, all you ever want is your product to be seen on that shelf. You don't really want to see very similar looking products that don't have any of your IP on the shop shelf next to it. So Trunky, a couple of years we were under the radar, then we started getting copied. Now I had a European design registration to protect the shape. You can't patent a Trunky because there's no technical innovation in a ride-on suitcase. But you can see that top shelf there were all copies from the sort of Southeast Asia that looked exactly the same as a Trunky, and we were able to get those removed from the market. But then the factories kind of realized we had some intellectual properties, started morphing these suitcases they were making into all sorts of weird shapes and sizes. And I kind of liken it to Trunkies and breeding around the sort of Schnovel area. And you get these kind of monstrosities that kind of start appearing lower down on that shelf. This is the Trunky dungeon in our old office. And there was one particular copy that was made by a British manufacturer, a British company that was sourcing in the Far East, and they copy everyone. They copy Tangletees and Joseph and all these household names. So I was like, this is going to have to be a big fight. So we took them to the High Court. This is a picture of the judgment. We won. The copy product's the one on the left, if you're not too sure. But essentially, because Trunky was such a unique invention, or such a unique visual product, that anything close to looking like it, my lawyers had told me was covered by the design registration. So we had our day in the High Court, had a European injunction banning the sale of their product until we'd had our verdict, and that's me holding up the judgment saying we won, which was fantastic. So what's the problem? Well, there's a minor technicality the other side thought should have been considered by the judge. So they appealed the decision, and the judge sided with them. So having won this case, I was then on the losing side, facing being sued for their loss of sales from the European injunction and all the legal fees. That felt a little bit unfair to me. And throughout this process, I'd started talking to the press because I wanted to let people know that there were counterfeit and copy products that weren't as good as our quality out in the market. And the press started lapping it up because I don't think anyone had really talked about being copied before. I guess it's a bit like the brand's dirty laundry. So we were getting quite a few column inches. And the lawyers said, you know, you've only got one more stop here. There's the Supreme Court we could try and take the case to, just round the corner from here. But they've only ever heard one design case previously, and it's going to take quite a bit of convincing. So we ran a national campaign in the newspapers, had Terence Conran, Kevin MacLeod championing how the interpretation of the law now disadvantaged the British design community. And we had our day in the Supreme Court, which was rather odd. You had the most experienced judges in the land in this room full of brightly coloured suitcases, arguing over how to interpret design law. Nothing really to do with did it look similar or not. It was all about the technical interpretation of law. And we lost, which was absolutely devastating. But the silver lining was having talked to the press and then leading the agenda and the narrative with the press. We were in every single national newspaper the following day with our stock photography, not saying we're on the brink of going into administration ourselves, but kind of championing the cause to design rights and how to interpret them. And the next year we had record sales. The counterfeit, or the lookalike product, was actually really poorly manufactured. It was made by a bucket manufacturer in China, and it just fell apart in your hands. So that product just disappeared from the market. And like I said, we had our best year ever in the UK, and it's partly down, I guess, through the PR. So that was another challenge, but also it was kind of the end of the road. There was nothing else I could do. I had to just sort of lick my wounds, shut that door and move on. We had to focus on growing our business, and I'd taken it as far as I could. So knowing when to quit and give up and then move on to the other stuff is really key as well. And then finally, COVID happened. Now, yeah, if you're in a children's travel product business, not great when there's a global travel ban, and there was no one to sell trunkies to. So we were averaging about £10 million turnover. That dropped to 3 million in the first year of COVID, and because of all the stop-start travel bans and things globally, we actually had 2 years of £3 million revenue. So it was a huge, huge hit for the business. We had to kind of really conserve our energy. There were loads of things I would have loved to have done, would love to have reached out and said, this is how you can keep your kids entertained at home. But our marketing team were on furlough. There were lots we couldn't do. We tried a few things. We tried making toddler face masks. Turns out toddlers didn't need to wear face masks in the end. We tried using antibacterial properties in the plastic so that the trunkie would have no germs on it when you were traveling. Maybe the mistake on that was leading with an ambulance design, which in hindsight probably wasn't the best model to launch that product with. But it was just about kind of just doubling down, saving as much money as we could, renegotiating absolutely everything. I'm sure some of you had a similar experience. And having to put the factory pretty much into hibernation for a number of months as well. But when travel did come back, we were there, Trunkie, in amongst all these amazing photos of, still get a little bit emotional thinking about this, but yeah, being a key part of families being reunited. So despite the challenges, just realising how important Trunkie had become within families with toddlers was just phenomenal. And during that time, I kind of had a bit of time to reflect, so I decided to write my book, my memoir. It's called 65 Roses and a Trunkie, and actually I was born with cystic fibrosis. Young children struggle to pronounce it, and they quite often call it 65 roses. And I think that's where a lot of my resilience stems from growing up with a life-threatening disease. I actually lost my twin sister to the disease when we were 15, and reflecting back on that childhood experience and my business decision-making process kind of ended up becoming this book that is hopefully helping businesses and people really understand how to be resilient and how to overcome challenges. So kind of wrapping up with the kind of 3 key learnings from my sort of 18, 20-year journey, I think it's really important that you embrace challenges. Challenges should be seen as opportunities for growth and not problems to not get out of bed and face. The sooner you face challenges on, the sooner you get over the other side. I think you need to focus your energy wisely, as I mentioned before. Influence the things you can influence and try and ignore the things you can't, because otherwise you're just wasting that valuable energy. And always adapt to change. The business landscape's always changing. We've had workshops today about AI. AI is going to be so fundamentally transformational for us all. We really need to be eyes wide open and adapt to change. So that was the end of my journey. I sold the business 2 years ago, and this is a picture of the team when we exited, and kind of couldn't sit on my bum for too long, and I've now launched another business kind of around sleep health, again co-founded with my brother, and we're actually using AI an awful lot in this business too, and it's called ZP, and it's aiming to improve sleep health with families, initially with a sleep training clock. So that's the end of my story so far. I think, Steph, we have some questions.
Such an amazing story, Rob. I mean, I never tire of hearing it. I wanted to ask you though, obviously with the going through the whole copycat legal case and everything, would you do that again? Because obviously, you know, you got the publicity from it, but you lost the case, and I imagine that was probably battered you in terms of dealing with all that mentally and everything else.
Yeah, I mean, I often get asked, what would you change? What would you do differently? Yeah. But I think we learned so much from the bad stuff that if we didn't do that, then we learned lessons through that as well.
Yeah.
Who knows? I mean, it cost £1 million in the end, so yeah, we could have probably used that money a lot wiselier. But but you learn so much from the things that don't go well. So.
Yeah. And do you think as well, you know, your story is, there's a fair bit of emotion in there as well, talking about the cystic fibrosis and your sister. Do you think that's made you kind of more of a risk taker in business? Are you, like, because you often hear that about the big CEOs and the people who've suffered hardship or something in their life, which then makes them go, well, the worst things that's happened to me, everything else, I'm just going to take a chance on.
Yeah, I think it's more that mindset of, because some people thought Dragon's Den should have been the be-all, end-all, and how did you possibly get over that? Well, like you say, it's worst things that have happened, so it was a minor inconvenience in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
So that's how I kind of approach challenges. It's just like they can be overcome. You don't know how long it's going to take to overcome them, but as long as you can focus that energy wisely and overcome them, you might end up in a different position, a different place, but you'll have succeeded because you've got over that challenge.
Yeah, it's inspirational. Would anyone like to ask a question at this point? Just, yeah, we'll take this on the front row. Any other hands want to pop up? No, great, thank you. Right, we'll take this first one.
Have you had any of the dragons come and apologise for being such a...
Yeah, bet.
A few years ago, I did have a few run-ins with them, and I think my favourite one was at the Growing Business Awards, where we won Small Business of the Year, and Theo Pathetis had just announced the previous winner, so I passed him on the steps up to pick up my award, so I gave him a little wink.
Yeah. Well, I've spoken to Deborah Meaden about it since, and she said, you know, when I remember talking to her about any businesses that got away that you look back on, and she always cites Trunky as one of them. So, you know, more fool them, hey?
I guess because it's such a visual product that they've seen it.
Yeah.
They don't always travel by private jet. They do see it in the airport. Don't really need to say anything.
Yeah. Take that question at the back. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. I'm Catherine Bennett from the High Value Manufacturing Catapult. I'm so proud of hearing your story, Rob. I live near Bristol, so thank you for that investment. Mike, I was going to ask about the dragons, but I've changed my question. Your story at the beginning talked about the BASF competition, and it made me think, should there be more competitions like that could help aspiring product designers like you go on, invest, create amazing business, worldwide sales, and more importantly, manufacture back in the UK? So maybe there's more we as a community could do on those kind of awards.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there were a few competitions. The RSA ran a big one as well. But I think when you're a student and you're just asked to design anything, the field's just too wide, and it takes a long time to try and narrow down what you should be creating within the course. So industry-sponsored competitions that kind of keep you focused, and then the industry that's sponsoring it can get new ideas and see how they can kind of push those into their markets. A match made in heaven, really.
Yeah, it's interesting though, because I did loads of like competitions and schemes and things when I was growing up, like the engineering education scheme, and you know, I just loved a freebie. But it was because, you know, I got to go on these amazing trips and see these amazing things. But it did also helps with your confidence, doesn't it? And it does open you up to meeting different people in different sectors. And in fact, actually, when I got Young Engineer for Britain, it was the EEF, as it was then, who gave me my award. So I've got this picture of me from when I'm 19, and I do think that's with this beautiful crystal ball, actually. So thanks for that. And also a fair bit of money. And but the point being is that definitely entering a competition like that when you did and the stuff I did, I definitely think that then set you on a path for just having that confidence and, you know, having the world opened up to you about the things that are out there.
Yeah, and I think young people today especially need a lot more confidence. They need a lot more resilience due to various reasons that I won't go into. They're just too soft and they need toughening up a little bit.
Yeah, so the resilience side of things. Yeah, we'll take a question here. Any others? And then I'll get the mic. Yeah, and one at the back down there. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, I work with university technical colleges, which are 14 to 19 schools, largely for engineers. And we are trying to encourage them to be innovative and enterprising, set up their own companies, take their ideas through to fruition. What advice would you give UTCs or schools or colleges? How can they change things to make that more likely?
I think encourage failure. Let them try, prototype, just test ideas. They don't have to think of everything, just get started, take that first step. And then coach them and help them along the way.
Yeah, it's really good that you're doing that though. Like the work of UTCs is incredible in terms of giving people like a tangible sense of what comes next in the world. There's a question over here, isn't there?
Yeah, thanks Rob. Truly inspirational story. It's not something that's been widely talked about today, but I'm sure there's a few manufacturers in the room that are potentially looking to exit. So have you got any advice for them in terms of the exit journey?
I'm just thinking which way to tackle this really. I mean, get a corporate finance advisor for sure to help you run the process. I think from our experience, running a competitive process was really valuable. So always try and run a bit of tension there in the negotiations. And I also think if you're an owner-managed or if your path won't be forever then with the business afterwards, you really need to start thinking about what you're going to do next as well, so you don't end up having this real clear purpose of what you are all about, and then that just disappears once you sign the deal, and then you're left kind of in limbo. And if golf isn't your thing, which isn't mine, then there's not many other options other than trying to figure out what you're all about.
Yeah. What made you sell the business, and then how do you feel now about it?
We had such a rough ride during COVID, and our financial backers weren't very supportive, and it was just like, guys, this just isn't working for anyone anymore.
And how do you feel now? Now you're 2 years out. Do you?
Well, I think I'm very proud that I've created something that's kind of hopefully going to carry on. I spent almost 20 years trying to grow it internationally and did. There's still more growth that can go, and good luck to them to try and achieve that.
Do you do that thing though? Like, because when I left BBC Breakfast, I've never watched BBC Breakfast since. So do you like, when you see a chunky in the airport, you're like, don't look at it.
I haven't really watched Dragon's Den, but
funny that.
But I have a fairly young family, and it was great when they're a few years ago when they're like always trunky spotting and wanting to go up to random strangers and say, my daddy makes them.
Ah, I love that.
With our car seat, when they were a bit older, they started spotting car seats. That we
yeah. Oh, that's lovely. Any other questions then? Did we have one over here? Have we got anyone else before we wrap things up? Yes, we'll take that one and then we'll wrap things up. Thank you.
As a co-owner of several trunkies, have you ever thought of designing a protection device for the adults?
Putting on some bumpers.
Yeah, ankle protectors. That would be a good one, wouldn't it? Excellent. Oh, well, Rob, thank you so much. It's been lovely, as ever, to hear from you. Put your hands together for Rob.
I'll be around for a few minutes.